Welcome to our channel. Today we are going to talk about one tragic incident of the Angola War. The shooting down of a Cuban helicopter in Negage in 1978. After the withdrawal of the South African and Zairean armies in 1976, the MPLA government, supported by Cuban troops, continued to fight the UNITA and FNLA rebel movements. On May 17, 1978, in the northeastern region of Angola, the Cuban troops suffered a hard blow. On that day, 2 Cuban helicopters were dispatched on a mission to support government troops, FAPLA, under attack by FNLA guerrillas, near the city of Negage. The helicopters flew toward a town located near the site of the fight. From this position, they could clearly observe the enemy's mortar fire, harassing the Cuban FAPLA forces. To suppress enemy fire, the FAPLA commander requested that the Cubans attack the FNLA position with helicopters. The highest-ranking Cuban officer on site was Colonel Harry Villegas, who, 10 years earlier, had been one of the survivors of Che Guevara's guerrilla campaign in Bolivia. Initially, Colonel Villegas disagreed with the FAPLA commander, believing that using artillery would be safer. However, after learning that the FAPLA artillery was low on ammunition, the decision was made. The Cuban helicopters would launch their attack on the enemy mortar positions. As the helicopters approached the FNLA line, their crews heard gunfire directed at them. Both helicopters returned fire, but after a while, a flare was spotted near the left side of the second helicopter, signaling that a fire had broken out after being struck by the enemy. Emilio Gonzalez, the pilot of the damaged helicopter, made a fatal mistake. He did not enter auto-rotation, as recommended for this type of emergency, but instead began making level turns. Auto-rotation, a protocol followed in emergencies in helicopter aviation, involves a rapid descent, during which the pilot must select a landing platform and proceed to land. The delay in landing the helicopter allowed the fire to spread. Inside the cabin, the crew and passengers moved toward the front, trying to escape the growing flames. In desperation, some crew members jumped from the helicopter, hoping to escape the inferno inside. After 6 minutes of panic, the helicopter lost control and plummeted toward the ground, heading for a ravine. The crash sent shockwaves through the jungle, with the wreckage hidden deep within the dense forest. Mario Rivas, the pilot of the first helicopter, made several attempts to search for survivors. He landed 3 times to search for their companions, but the dense jungle hindered any rescue attempt. Finally, Rivas managed to land on the summit of one of the hills closest to the disaster. Colonel Villegas, who was aboard, commanded his men to disembark and proceed toward the wreckage. The soldiers climbed through the rugged terrain, moving toward the crash site, despite the threat of enemy mortar fire. Villegas led his soldiers, shouting commands as they advanced toward the danger zone. Despite their efforts, the search proved fruitless, and they have to come to the helicopter that took off and continue searching from the air. Then, Rodolfo Castillo, the flight technician of the downed helicopter, was seen waving a white shirt from a distant hilltop, accompanied by a FAPLA soldier. They rushed to land and successfully rescued Castillo, but a FAPLA soldier who had been with him was lost. Castillo was seriously injured, with a broken collarbone and a deep wound on the back of his head. Later, Castillo would recount how he lost sight of his comrade during the final stretch of his escape. As darkness fell and the lead helicopter was left with only enough fuel for the return trip, it had to head back to the Negage airfield. The next day, the rescue team returned to the crash site. They found no survivors. 15 soldiers and officers, 6 of them Cuban, who were aboard the downed helicopter, died that day. Those who survived the crash were executed by FNLA soldiers after being tortured. Most of the bodies that were recovered had been mutilated. But the FNLA paid a heavy price for this massacre. On the 24th of May, several Cuban and FAPLA battalions launched an operation that destroyed multiple FNLA bases on Angolan territory and killed hundreds of its militants. For the Cubans, the events of that day were not only a harsh blow but also a painful reminder of the brutal nature of the war in Africa. Thank you for watching our video. Subscribe to our channel if you'd like to learn more about the Angola War.